Since independence from France in 1960, Niger has experienced a number of military coups. The latest on February the 18th demonstrated yet again that the army has never been too distant from the political arena. But will the latest seizure of power herald the beginning of a new dawn of democracy? Or is it really a struggle for power over the country's considerable natural resources? And how much of a factor is France's interest in maintaining its existing and exclusive deal for uranium in Niger? Join me, Vuyiswa, and a knowledgeable panel of analysts sharing what they think can be done to stop the facade of democratization in Africa today.
Troops in Niger stormed a cabinet meeting and seized the country's President Mamadou Tandja and his ministers before announcing the suspension of the constitution and dissolving the government. Calling themselves the Supreme Council for the Restoration of Democracy, the coup leaders have earned a promise to restore the country to democratic rule by appointing a civilian to be prime minister until new elections are held. The junta, however, failed to announce a date for the new post. The new Prime Minister, Mamadou Tandja, served as Communications Minister in a previous administration which came to power in a coup in 1999. Niger has experienced long periods of military rule since independence from France in 1960. The deposed president, Mr Tandja, was a former colonel and part of a coup in 1974. The junta's reason to overthrow him followed his controversial referendum last August. After winning two successful elections in 1999 and 2004, he was expected to step down last December after 10 years in power. But the referendum abolished presidential term limits, paving the way for Mr Tandja to stay in power indefinitely. This coup is the third in West Africa in 18 months, and there have been several in the last few years. Africa Today finds out whether there are more Nigers to come and what can be done to stop the facade of democratization on the African continent.
Hello and welcome to Africa Today with me, Vuyiswa. Joining me to discuss the latest situation in Niger are Rolake Akinola, West Africa Senior Analyst at Control Risks Group, Thamsanqa Zhou, a political commentator, and on the phone from Addis Ababa in Ethiopia, we're welcoming Professor Okey Onyelekwe, the Managing Director at the Center for Sustainable Governments. Welcome to you all. If I could start with you, Rolake. I mean, you've seen the situation in Niger and it's a repeating pattern. But I wanted to ask you about Tandja himself. You know, people say he became drunk with power. So what, from your perspective, were the main characteristics of his 10 years in power?
Well, I think, Tandja rode into power when he was first elected in 2000 with the promise of considerable economic transformation and political change. And obviously coming into power on the back of another military coup, expectations were high. Yes. But what we saw over the years, and particularly in the last few years, a successive sort of move within the government to centralize power and consolidate his position. And particularly with Niger's increasing strategic economic importance, when you look at the uranium sector, it was pretty clear that that thirst and hunger of power actually escalated, just as Niger was increasingly prominent in the global radar when it came to uranium production worldwide. So that was a crucial factor, I think.
Right. But Tammy, I mean, is it the case, do you feel, that maybe he started out with good intentions and then once he got comfortable in the seat of power and recognizes some of the perks he could get, he changed? Would you give him that benefit of doubt? Does power corrupt, or did he intend to be the way he was anyway?
No, not really. I think many scholars are of the view that most of these former military people who remove their uniforms and then masquerade as the civilian government leaders, if you want to call it, never leave that military mentality. You have seen this happen in Pakistan with General Musharraf. You have actually seen that in Nigeria, actually, with Olusegun Obasanjo, who came in as a military person and then as a civilian leader. But the Nigerian constitution, at least, would not allow him to go on with the number of terms in office. So I think Mamadou Tandja is just a victim of that army upbringing. He was part of the 1974 coup when he was in the military. The support that he had from the guys that led the subsequent coup in the 1999, I think it was. Yeah. So you would find that it's not that he changed, it's only that he had that opportunity to be in power without the military uniform. And that is the worry for most people, that most of these army guys, even those that are coming up now, might actually just remove their uniforms and want to cling on to power.
Okay, well, before we get into analyzing how this new junta may actually have some kind of possible positive change, I'd like to bring you in, Professor Onyelekwe, there in Addis Ababa. You've written extensively on the phenomenon of coups in Africa. How do you analyze this particular one in Niger?
Oh, I think the recent coup d'etat, it's just a tip of the iceberg, and it's evidence of a growing phenomenon in the continent, albeit a combination of military coup d'etats and civilian coup d'etat. It is not extraordinary in my judgment, because I think there's a fundamental problem which manifests itself in different forms, which is the crisis of legitimacy within the continent. And although for decades we witnessed military coup d'etat, but there's a new, it has metamorphosized into a new phenomenon of trying to use the constitution or the electoral process to accomplish the same end, which is elongation of incumbents, their stay in office.
But can I interrupt you a little bit, Professor, there, and just say, do you not feel that based on the fact that the deposed president abused the Constitution, basically ignored it to maintain power for himself, do you accept the argument from the people in the military who felt that they actually had no other option, because technically speaking, Tandja himself created his own coup constitutionally without using a gun? Do you not sympathize with the feeling that they've expressed that they actually had no other option because he basically seemed to want to be president for life?
You know, this is really a catch-22, and it's one which must be seriously addressed at the level of the AU, the regional communities, as well as the international community. The fact that Tandja himself has staged a civilian coup d'etat created this situation. But the challenge now is, what are good coups and bad coups? So that I think that for us now, it's not the question of whether it's through the military or through the civilians. It's a question of how we address some of the fundamental problems that will continue giving rise to these kinds of situations which we're beginning to see.